Here's something German units never expected. They kept hearing the same signals, noises, and movements from different directions, and assumed the Soviets had circled around them. But the Soviets hadn't. They were using a simple deception method that made small groups sound like entire battalions. And throughout the Eastern Front, this tactic created confusion, hesitation, and moments of panic in German formations that believed they were cut off long before any real encirclement took place. What made this deception so effective wasn't complexity, it was how it played into the fears and expectations of soldiers fighting in a landscape where visibility was limited and communication could collapse without warning. German troops often relied on sound to understand what was happening beyond their immediate view. Dense forests, snowstorms, fog, and broken terrain made it hard to see enemy positions clearly. A tank engine, a burst of rifle fire, or the movement of footsteps carried across these landscapes and shaped a unit's decisions. The Soviets understood this well. They knew German forces feared encirclement more than almost anything else, so they developed ways to make small detachments sound much larger. One method was the coordinated use of sound signals, whistles, shouted commands, and controlled bursts of gunfire that echoed across tree lines and ravines. A few soldiers could create the illusion of multiple groups moving into position, and German units, trained to react quickly to the threat of being outflanked, often overestimated the numbers around them. One of the most effective tricks involved spreading out small Soviet teams at wide intervals and having them move in short, sharp bursts. Each group made noise at different moments, creating the effect of troops advancing from multiple angles. To German soldiers, especially at dawn or dusk when light was poor, it sounded like several units shifting position at once. Even a few individuals could give the impression that an entire flank was collapsing. Reports from the front described German platoons halting advances, changing direction, or calling for reinforcements based solely on sound patterns that suggested they were being outmaneuvered. Another layer of deception came from controlled fire. Soviet soldiers often used single shots, spaced at irregular intervals to mimic the movement of scouting parties. At other times, they fired short, concentrated bursts from different positions to imitate the opening moves of a coordinated attack. German troops, unable to see the enemy clearly, responded as if they were facing larger formations. A few rifles could hold back an entire company simply by creating the right acoustic pattern. The forested terrain of the Eastern Front amplified this effect. Echoes carried unpredictably, and the same sound could bounce from ridge to ridge, making its source impossible to pinpoint. The Soviets also used deception tools like improvised noisemakers tied to tripwires or branches. When tugged or triggered, these produced snapping sounds, rustling, or movement that suggested nearby activity. In some cases, they attached cans, metal scraps, or wood pieces to strings that ran across trees. A single pull could make it seem like someone was advancing along a flank. German units that heard repeated noises in the same area often assumed a group was slowly tightening a ring around them. They redirected troops, shifted their line, or paused their advance, giving the Soviets time to reposition or regroup. Even the deployment of flare guns contributed to the illusion. A flare shot from one position, followed by another from a different angle, created the impression that Soviet units were signaling each other across a wide area. To German troops, this mirrored the behavior of larger forces coordinating an approach. When combined with scattered rifle fire, the picture became even more convincing. A patrol might believe multiple platoons were closing in, when, in reality, they were hearing fewer than a dozen men. What made these tricks especially effective was timing. The Soviets often used them right before launching an attack, or at moments when German forces were already uncertain about their surroundings. A few misleading sounds could convince a commander to fall back, adjust artillery, or prepare for a breakthrough that wasn't coming. It didn't take much to disrupt momentum. Even a short delay meant Soviet forces had more time to prepare their defenses or bring up reinforcements. German diaries later reflected this experience. Soldiers wrote about hearing movement everywhere, or sensing they were being closed in from multiple directions. Many described moments where they felt surrounded until daylight revealed nothing but scattered Soviet positions. The confusion wasn't the result of chaos. It was the result of deliberate deception. And this technique, repeated across the front, contributed to the sense that Soviet forces were always present, in greater numbers than they actually were. In the end, the reason this trick worked so well was simple. It exploited the one thing soldiers trusted most in low visibility environments: sound. By controlling when and where noises appeared, the Soviets shaped German perceptions without needing the manpower to match. They turned the landscape itself into a tool of misdirection, making German units think they were trapped long before any real encirclement began. On the Eastern Front, where fear of being cut off was constant, that illusion was sometimes enough to change the course of a battle.